Thinking of it that way made his destination seem a bit far off. Rows upon rows of bookshelves stood on either side of the hallway. These bookshelves were packed with countless books. The books of Yggdrasil could be broadly split into 5 categories. First, there was data on monsters. This data was used to summon them as mercenaries. Nazarick had 3 types of monsters. The first type was NPCs, created just like the players. The second type was monsters level 30 and below that spawned automatically. Finally, there were monsters summoned as mercenaries. These mercenary monsters could be summoned with a ritual. This ritual used the book plus an appropriate amount of gold for the desired level. In other words, they needed the books to call upon those monsters. The second type of book consisted of magic items. Certain data crystals dwelled only within things that took the form of books. Items shaped like books were generally single-cast items. They were different from scrolls. A scroll required the user to be a class capable of casting the spell it contained, but anyone could use a book. The third type of book was made up of event items. It was common for items required for class changes to take the form of books. When Aints changed from Skeleton Mage to Elder Lick, he needed a Book of the Dead. There were many others, such as the Martial Arts Study Guide and Strange Rumors of the 4 Great Elementals. Besides class changes, some books allowed the user to learn new spells. The fourth type contained graphical data. These were books containing the graphical data of swords, shields, armor, and so on. If someone with the right blacksmith skills used one on the appropriate resources, the corresponding appearance could be created. The fifth type was novels passed around in the form of books. Most of them were old, out-of-copyright works from the outside world. The next largest number were background stories handed out by the admins. Finally, there were also original stories written by Yggdrasil players. There was also fan fiction set in Yggdrasil, as well as strategy guides based on journals. Most of the Great Tomb of Nazarick's innumerable books were of the first type. They were collected in order to summon mercenary monsters. Of course, there was no reason to have collected so many of them. Even if they invested all the Guild's assets, they wouldn't be able to summon a tenth of these monsters. The reason they had so many was that the books were cheap. A guild member went a little overboard on a copying spree. The excess books were also used to hide more valuable items. Mayor gazed sidelong at the books as he walked past. Then all of a sudden, a ghost-like figure appeared from between some bookcases to block his path. It wore a hooded raven black robe that melted into the library's gloom. On the belt around its waist, which was threaded with multiple gems, was a jewel-tipped wand. Beneath the hood was a whitish face. It seemed to have already turned to grave wax. Its hands were all skin and bone. With every move it made, the darkness surrounding it wavered slightly. It was one of the most famous undead casters, an Elder Lick. In Yggdrasil, this type was known colloquially as the White Foe Millionaire. It was level 30, which made it the second least powerful Elder Lick. It had close palette-swapped relatives, the Red Foe Millionaire and the Black Foe Millionaire. What made it different from an ordinary Elder Lick was the band around its left upper arm. It said, "Librarian J. Welcome, Master Mayor." The Elder Lick greeted him. Its voice was hoarse and difficult to understand. It bowed slowly but deeply. It was a proper bow, and it placed one hand on its chest. I came to see the head librarian." Is he in the back?" The Elder Lick pondered for a moment and then spoke. "The head librarian is currently creating scrolls, so he is in the crafting room." "Thank you. Allow me to guide you. This way." "Oh, it's okay. I don't mean to interrupt your work." "Not to worry. Our role is to be of use to those who visit the library." Refusing at that point would have been rude. "Understood. Then please take me there." A smile appeared on the Elder Lick's horrifying face, and he set off walking out in front. Mayor followed, looking sidelong at the Elder Liches and other undead casters. They passed on their way. "By the way, shall I put that book back?" "Oh yes, please." The Elder Lick looked at the title of the book as he took it. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Was it interesting? Yeah, it was. I am trying to think of what to read next. "Oh, I have a recommendation for you. This book is so funny you won't be able to stop laughing. It's about a murderer who, oh, here we are, thank you." Mayor opened the door he'd been led to. The room had originally felt fairly spacious, but it was cramped now. Huge shelves lined every wall. Lined up tidily on the shelves were countless catalysts. These included ores, precious metals, stones with attributes, gems, and all sorts of powders. There were also organs from various animals. There was also a large amount of parchment, both rolled and flat. These were all resources for scroll creation. Of course, this wasn't all the great tomb of Nazareth had. There were many hundreds of times this amount in the treasury. The resources in this room were just the ones prepared for immediate use. A fairly large drafting table stood in the center of the space. A piece of parchment was spread across it. Standing before the table was a skeleton. It looked like a combination of a human and some animal. It wasn't very tall, perhaps a little less than 5 feet. 2 horns, like an ogre-s, stuck out of its skull. Its hands each had 4 fingers. Its feet were hooves. This strange figure was wrapped in a bright saffron himation. A hood-like sheet was draped over its head, so its horns wouldn't tear it. Another sheet was wrapped around its hips. It also had a silver bracelet with jewels the colors of the rainbow. A golden ankh hung around its neck. Multiple bizarre rings curled around its finger bones. Gems studded its himation. All of these were fairly powerful magic items. At its hip, hanging like swords, were several scrolls. Although its appearance and gear were peculiar, it was a skeleton mage. It was one of the early races of undead. This being was a step below the elder Lick Mare had just met. But this skeleton mage, Titus Anarius Secundus, was head of this huge library. A supreme being created him to be specialized in crafting, not combat. His total levels were actually higher than that elder Lick's. Hello, Guardian Mare, I welcome you. Oh, hi Titus, I came to ask you a favor, I see. Then let us hear it, shall we? Okay, I am hoping you can lend me some level 75 or higher minions. Understood. So you're heading outside? Yes, I am. You knew right away, huh? I would never forget the words of our ruler, Lord Aints. Considering your position, I arrived at the answer immediately. Very well, he thought for a moment. I'll lend you our overlords Coxius, Ulpius, Aelius, Fulvius, and Aurelius. What, really? Yes, really. Honestly, their fighting power is a bit excessive for the library. They would be happier to guard you than to do the dusting here. Thank you. That said, I can let you take them for free. I'd like you to assist me with something. We're going to make a scroll. Yes, sir. What do I need to do? You don't have to worry about a thing. All you need to do is cast a tier 4 spell at the scroll when I give you the word. What spell should I use? I'll leave that up to you. Mare looked puzzled. Being left to choose for himself was the most difficult part. Was a common spell fine? Titus reached a bony hand toward a small desk placed next to the drafting table. His objective was a mountain of golden glimmers, Yggdrasil gold. Suddenly, some of the gold beneath his hand began to melt. Then, as if it had a mind of its own, it moved onto the parchment. The snake of gold that had flowed onto the parchment writhed. It seemed a place for it had been designated ahead of time, and it began to spread. In the space of a breath, a magic circle had been drawn in gold on the parchment. It was complex but delicate. Okay, Mare, who had been waiting nervously for his turn, heeded the signal and cast his spell. He felt his magic getting sucked into the magic circle. Normally, that would mean the scroll was complete. In any case, that is what Mare thought. Then crimson flames, the unthinkable, occurred on the drafting table. Mare watched in horror as the drafting table blazed up the way alcohol ignites when flaming. It vanished in the space of 2 blinks. The flames left hardly any trace behind. It was as if they'd been an illusion. There wasn't even a burning smell. But the top of the drafting table proved the fire really happened. On it were the remains of the scroll, charred remains. As if he had been expecting just such an outcome, Titus snatched up the burned remnants and took a closer look. So he can load it with a tier 4 spell. It seems like it definitely doesn't depend on the skill of the caster, either. He mumbled about 10-year-olds being no good as he scribbled in his log. What happened? Did I do something wrong? No, don't worry. In order to conserve parchment, we were trying to create scrolls using materials we can gather in this world. But the quality is so awful, there were limits on what kind of parchments could be used depending on the tier of the spell. For instance, regular parchment could be used for spells up to tier 2, but no higher. With the highest quality parchment, Dragonhide made it possible to make tier 10 spell scrolls. Naturally, Dragonhide was a first-class material. It could be acquired only by hunting a dragon. So all the members of the guild Aints Ulgaun had hunted them like crazy. But that was back in the Yggdrasil days. Until they could confirm the existence of dragons and other creatures in this world, Aints had limited the use of Dragonhide. This was understandable. He wouldn't allow them to use up their stores without a way to secure more. There might come a time when they absolutely needed it. No, not my dragons. Of course not. We wouldn't do that. Your dragons and all the other summoned beings exist by the will of the supreme beings. Naturally, it is strictly prohibited to harm them. With an amused look at Mare, who had relaxed, Titus tossed the ruined scroll into the garbage. So does that mean the regular parchment in this world is no good for making scrolls? Mare eyed the charred remains. There's a very good chance that's what it means. Well, I don't know. It's possible my scroll-making technique is considered heretical in this world. Apparently, the way people here make potions is quite different. But you can say it's the parchment's fault after just one failure, can you? Just one? We've done a number of tests on parchment from outside this world. But when we try to imbue any with spells over tier 3, it always ends in a fire. Bursting into flames must happen when the magic cannot be sealed inside the parchment. But the casters in this world use that parchment, don't they? No, it's possible the sheet we just threw away wasn't the typical variety used in this world. Of course, considering all the various countries, it's not impossible. But when we tried with the parchment used in the countries near Nazarick, he held up a sheet with a different texture. The results were even worse. It could only contain up to tier 1. Does that mean humans are good at making the best use of inferior materials? No. Probably it's a difference of techniques. It's painful to admit, but perhaps their techniques are more polished. Somehow, I want to gain new techniques and advance beyond them. That's great. Mare respected the head librarian for his spirit of self-improvement. It's all thanks to the great supreme being. Now then, Guardian Mare, I'll lend you the overlords as I promised. Come with me. 10:28 a.m. Nazarick time. After leaving his ring behind for safekeeping and passing through the ground level, Mare teleported with his party to the center of a room in a stone building. Stone architecture was sturdy and heavy, but it required a solid base, so it wasn't suited to the wetlands. It also required architectural technology that the lizard men had no way of possessing. Obviously, this building had been made by a third-party workers dispatched by Nazarick. The reason they had gone so far as to send personnel over to build the place was explained vividly by the object enshrined in the back of the room behind Mare. He bowed to it deeply. The overlords accompanying him followed suit. Elevated a few steps up was an exquisite statue of the ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick, Aints Ul Gown. It was so lifelike, it was as if the man himself had been turned to stone. The way he was thrusting his staff up at an angle gave him the air of a ruler. It imparted a sense of his majesty to all who saw it. A number of offerings had been placed on the altar before the statue. Of course, to Mare, none of them had any value. They were all fish and sad little flowers, but Mare didn't find it offensive. The offerings had clearly been made out of respect and worship. For example, the flowers were not the ones blooming on the marsh. They were varieties picked at the risk of life and limb in the forest, and the size of the fish far surpassed the average of the ones the lizard men ate. They were offering their best. Mare nodded in satisfaction. That the rabble should admire his great master made him very happy. "You've done a good job," he called to the lizard men who were nervously watching him. They were the ones in charge of cleaning this shrine. They had druid powers rare among lizard men, and around their necks they wore medals. The Aints Ul Gown guild crest was etched into them. Really, the difference between Mare and them was significant. He was with the conqueror and they were the conquered. There should have been no need for him to thank them. But his deep satisfaction, stemming from the same reason as before, compelled him. Leaving behind the lizard men as they bobbed their heads to him, he and the 5 overlords left the shrine. Before them lay the marsh and the lizardmen's settlement. The lizard men were more prosperous than before. Of course, their numbers had decreased in the war, but as a result of the 5 tribes coming together, their village was bigger and stronger. The large area was enclosed by a fence. Several watchtowers had been built, although it was unclear how, given the uneven ground. Bony white beings, probably Nazarick old guarders, kept watch up inside them. They were armed with bows. There were also Nazarick old guarders in the marsh itself. They seemed to be on patrol to keep out any foreign threats. I wonder where Cocytus is. Cocytus stood out in more ways than one. If he was in the village, it should have been easy to pick him out immediately. And if he was inside a house, his attendants, fitting the same criteria as Mayor S, should have been standing outside the door. Mayor scanned the area with those things in mind, but couldn't see any sign of him. Can you ask someone where Cocytus is? Understood. One moment, please. The Overlord who replied, Aurelius, returned to the shrine. Mayor looked out over the marsh at the peaceful lizardman village. The lizardmen didn't seem on guard against the Nazaric old guarders. That went for the lizardmen young as well. They coexisted as if it were perfectly natural. They don't seem to hold any grudges after being attacked and conquered by undead. So it must mean Cocytus' policy of friendly relations is working. Or were lizardmen just a docile species? Mayor absent-mindedly wondered about those things until Aurelius returned a moment later. Sorry to keep you waiting, Master Mayor. The ones working at the shrine say they don't know where he is, but the chief of the United Tribe, Shasryu Shasha, might. Oh, okay, then let us go see him. Mayor set off following Aurelius. They weren't aiming for the village on the marsh, but rather they walked along the lakeshore to a place just outside the forest. They could see Nazaric old guarders in the trees from a distance. The party's destination was on the edge of another marsh, a place where a fairly large-scale construction project was underway. The water had been dammed, and about 10 stone golems were digging. They carried the dirt to land, after which lizardmen carted it away in wheelbarrows. As Mayor watched them to figure out what they were doing, a big lizardman ran over to him, all flustered. It was a splendidly built lizardman covered in scars. He was clearly different from the other lizardmen, in more ways than one. The medal around his neck swung wildly in his panic. The medals, worn for protection and as a sign of subordination, had no magic power themselves, but they were proof of being owned by Aints, and that was the reason no one in the great tomb of Nazaric, under the influence of the supreme beings, could harm the lizardmen for no reason. Of course, if they deserved to die, that would have been a different story. Luckily, perhaps, lizardmen knew their place and respected the strong. No one among them was foolish enough to offend their keepers. Welcome, Master Mayor, he said. My name is Ure Shasryu Shasha, right? That I am honored you know me. Oh, I heard about you from Cocytus. Do you know where he is right now? Shasryu began to think. I am fairly certain he took several of his subordinates to conquer the Toadmen. He also took a few dozen lizardmen so they could observe. Toadmen. A toad-like subhuman race that inhabits the northeastern part of the lake. We don't get along very well. They have the ability to order around large monsters and magical beasts, so from our perspective, they were a difficult opponent. I heard that in the generation of my father's father, there was a huge war. The lizardmen lost so badly that one tribe collapsed. Figures they were strong if they were from the north. The large body of water was actually more like two lakes stuck together. It was shaped like an upside-down gourd. The southern lake, which was slightly smaller, is where the lizardmen lived. It was half marshland and half open water. Not many large monsters lived there because the water was shallow. In contrast, the northern lake was deeper. It was home to many larger monsters. They tended to be more powerful than the ones from the southern lake. Of course, to Mayor, the difference was negligible. These toadmen, they aren't actually Teasfakes, are they? Teasfakes were the monsters that lived in the poisonous swamp that once surrounded Nazaric. Mayor knew that his sister had a few. I am afraid I don't know about that. Perhaps you can ask Cocytus when he returns. I imagine he'll be back soon. I'll do that. Then I wanted to ask about something else. This seems like quite a big construction project. What are you making? It's not very close to the village, and it doesn't seem like a fence or something for defense. We were building our fourth fish preserve. When Mayor heard Shasryu's detailed explanation, it made sense to him. It was a good thing that the lizardman tribes had combined, but when they all gathered, food became a problem. Many of their members had died in the war, but in this location, they couldn't catch enough to go around. Of course, if they went back to their old villages to go fishing, the problem would be solved, but their new ruler, Cocytus, wouldn't allow it. Regardless of how it would have gone if an entire tribe of adults traveled the marsh, sending a small number would increase their chances of getting attacked by monsters. The lizardmen numbers were already down, so he didn't want to lose any more. Cocytus wanted the lizardmen to thrive, so he had started to work on the food issue. First, he brought and distributed food from Nazaric, with Aints' permission, of course. Then he struggled to come up with a lasting source of food for them. he found Zayusu's fish preserves. With advice from Demiurge, he helped them build preserves that were even more efficient. Construction proceeded rapidly, and they already had 3 large preserves. This was to be the 4th. But you haven't raised any fries yet, right? No, all we can do using our my brother's knowledge is care for fish that are already grown to some extent. But using what we learned from Demiurge, we've built fry preserves and are nearly ready to use them. Within the next few years, we should be able to support double the number of lizard men we currently have with farmed fish alone. I see. So after a few years, we won't have to bring any more fish from Nazareth, huh?